So here's the initial problem. I have a drummer with fluctuating idle. It's moving around about 100 RPM when it's cold. It gets up to sometimes around 300 when it's hot. So let's see if it'll do it for us now. Okay, so on initial assessment of the engine bay, this here is the air idle control valve just here. We're going to take off and clean. In order to get to that, we're going to have to remove the intercooler. So to take the intercooler off, we're going to have to undo the hose clamp here going to the throttle body, take off the blow-off valve, or even just the standard blow-off valve that you have. I've already done that. And also undo it here, down here at the turbo. There's also two screws on either side holding it down, mounting the intercooler down. So with the two screws out and all the pops disconnected, that should just pull out. Okay, so with the intercooler removed, we use rag to stuff into the throttle body here and also into the turbo, just to obviously so there's no debris or anything falls into them, causing problems later on. This here is the air idle control valve. Now this lead here has air going into it, but this lead down the bottom here is a coolant hose. So as you take that off, you just want to put that up out of the way so it doesn't obviously spill all over the engine. Okay, so we're finally up to removing the air idle control valve. Just getting the last bolt out now. Okay, so in total there was 3 connections to it. This one here went into the intake. This one down here was a return from the throttle body, and this one down here was coolant. Now to clean it. To clean this, we're going to have to take off this connection to the sensor. So we're going to just mark the side here just with a white texter, just so we can put it back in the exact same spot while lining them two up. As part of cleaning this throttle position sensor is to take off these two screws here. Using a Phillips head screwdriver, I've managed to strip both of these. So what I've done is I ended up getting some vice grips and just clamping it on there and just doing it enough to break it. The first thing you want to do is just open the throttle position sensor up, just using your finger. Spray it inside there, let it sit there for a bit. So upon reinstalling the top of this sensor, I've ensured that the lines line up on both sides. Make sure you mark both sides so you can get it sitting in the correct position. Also, the sensor, I've read in other posts that this should be closed. However, mine kept on going back to the same position of about half opened. So I'm going to leave it like that and see how it goes. Okay, so upon reinstallation of this, I have just done up all these bolts just finger tight, just until they touch. Because it's such a low torque setting, you want to get them all to touch evenly, and then go from there and just nip them up. I'm just going to apply the same amount of degree of turn, so I'm just going to go about that much to each of them and go from there, because you don't want to crush the gasket. If you do crush the gasket, it can cause it not to seal just as much as if you don't do it up tight enough. Okay, with the sensor reinstalled, we've got the hose going back here, which comes out from the throttle body back on. We've got the coolant hose back on here. We've also got the lead back on the top here, which comes from the intake over here. Next thing to do is to put the intercooler back on. I found it easier to attach the first pipe to the turbo first, because it's a bit easier to maneuver this one over once you do that. It might be a bit backwards. Either way, it's going to be difficult, so have fun with it. Got the first pipe onto the turbo. Now we'll focus our attention up to the throttle body and getting this one here on. As I stated, if you get this one here, if you get the turbo on first and then this one's, for me, it's a little bit more manoeuvrable, so it's a bit easier. Final stage of cleaning the air idle control valve is to reset the ECU. So what you have to do is disconnect the positive and the negative terminals, leave it for 10 minutes. During that 10 minutes, touch your brakes and pump them up completely until they're nice and firm. Do not touch the accelerator at any point during this resetting of the ECU. After starting the engine, we'll leave the engine running for around about 10 minutes until the thermostat opens up and the cooling fans kick on just down in here. This allows the ECU reset to be done correctly. It also allows the gasket which was put on to the idle air control valve hopefully to bed in and to seal. So after allowing the car to get up to operating temperature, which took about 12 minutes, I'm now taking the car on a 10-kilometre drive, staying off boost, in order to allow the gasket to bed in better to the idle control valve.